Hello everyone, this is Anna Kenny, and during this session we are going to be focusing on the primary and secondary education in Northern Ireland. Now, Northern Ireland has very similar topics that they discuss with their students and educate their students on as in the United States, but they're also different in ways that I think you'll be able to pick up on as we go through this presentation. So just kind of think about that as this presentation is going on, ways that the US and Northern Ireland may differ in the types of curriculum they teach and their structures with their schools. So starting off with the primary education and primary curriculum, students can begin this curriculum at the ages of between 4 and 5 up until 11. So it's essentially our elementary leading to our middle school education. This curriculum is made up of religious education, language and literacy, mathematics and numeracy, arts, the world around us, personal development, mutual understanding, and physical education. Now I'm just going to define two of these really quick because they kind of sound like big topics, specifically the world around us and personal development. There's a lot of little things in there that I think should be noted. The world around us for these students focuses on the development of knowledge, skills, and understanding in geography, history, science, and technology. Personal development focuses on emotional development, social skills, learning to learn, health, relationships, sexuality education, and mutual understanding in the local and global economy. So for those of you who are visiting these primary education settings, I would be very interested to see what you find regarding how they teach about sexuality education and how they start those students in learning about their mutual understanding in the local and global economy, and then think about how that compares to students in the United States when we start learning about these things and how we are learning about these things. So going next into the secondary curriculum, it's very similar to the primary curriculum. Their main ideas of math, language and literacy, it all transfers over to their secondary curriculum, but there is also an addition of modern language and environment, so continuing to develop that world scope and worldview. Additionally, in the secondary curriculum, there is a large push on the focus of employability, personal development, local and global citizenship, and home economics, and that's through the idea of learning for life and work. So I thought this was very interesting because these students are really being pushed and mentored to how to become global citizens in society and help make an impact, whether it be personally through their jobs or throughout the environment. And for the secondary school system, these students can begin at the age of 11 until they are up to the age of 18. Next, we are going to be getting into the school structures. So the first 4 listed are available during the primary and secondary education system. The 5th is available only during the secondary curriculum that students can get into it. So controlled schools. The Education Authority provides and manages controlled schools through the boards of governors. Primary and post-primary boards of governors for controlled schools include transfer members, and there's also a number of controlled integrated schools. So these controlled schools are a lot like our public institutions here in the United States, run by the government and such. Now, Catholic maintained schools are, again, very similar to the ones here in the United States. They are very similar to the private Catholic schools that we have here. The Catholic schools in Northern Ireland are controlled by the Council for Catholic Maintained Schools, and they have Roman Catholic ethos. Grant maintained integrated schools have integrated ethos and high levels of autonomy. Now, these schools are kind of becoming a little bit more mainstream. People are starting to understand the value behind these schools, which we'll discuss a little bit later in this presentation. But these schools are really starting to integrate students of differing religions and differing backgrounds and ethnicities, so that way they get that integrated education system with that. Other maintained schools are mostly, a large majority of them are Irish medium, which means that the education is provided in an Irish-speaking school. So again, as we noted in previous PowerPoints that we've all listened to, these schools are very important because it's helping protect the language, it's helping protecting the culture of Ireland and Northern Ireland. So these schools, again, are very, very important, and the Church of Ireland owns 3 other maintained schools within these schools, but once, like I said, the majority of them are Irish medium. Now, the last school is voluntary grammars, and as I previously stated, these schools are only available during the secondary curriculum level of their education. These are post-primaries that select on the basis of academic ability, and we're about to get into this in just a second, but the idea of voluntary grammars, they are highly regarded. Many believe that this is the best way to help a student during their secondary education to advance them to either higher education or into the working world. So going into the 11 plus test. Now, secondary education became free for students over the age of 14 with the Education Act of 1944. And since that point, secondary education has been split between two types. So there's grammar schools, which I just had mentioned, which focused on academic studies with the assumption that many of their pupils would go on to higher education. And then there are secondary modern schools, which were intended for children who would be going into trades, and those are essentially the other four schools that I had previously stated. So one of the fascinating things about this 11 plus test is that the results students received on this test, which they took at the age of 11, like just beginning middle school, resulted in their student placement of what type of school they would be going to. One article I read stated that the test was designed to see if students were able to learn in a grammar school environment with peers of a similar standard. So when we think about the ethics and morality of education, this 11 plus test kind of went against all of that. It essentially separated students based on their education skill set at that level. It kind of, I think, hindered students from what they could be in the education that they could receive based on this test. So the test was dropped in 2008 by Northern Ireland, and grammar schools decided to set up their own entry tests. And as I previously stated, grammar schools are still highly regarded. I mean, these students still believe that and their parents still believe that they're receiving a higher education. Numerous articles I read said, how grammar schools are still getting students ready more than these other secondary modern schools. So one fact actually was that enrollment for the 2017-2018 school year regarding post-primary grammar schools reached its highest level, which was at 44.7%. So as I said, these schools are really still highly regarded. It's kind of the same mindset as, private educations in high school, like give you a better education than if you were to go to a public school. Same mindset. And people are still feeding into these tests, and students are still really focusing on getting accepted into these grammar schools at such a young age, which I find very, very interesting. Next, we are going to be discussing Catholic and integrated education. So students in Northern Ireland still received some type of education affiliated with the dominant religion, i.e. Protestant and Catholic. And the Catholic population, I read in numerous places, is beginning and is continuing to increase. So again, this kind of brings in that tension of students are continuing to receive an education that can be more lenient towards one religion or another, kind of continuing that tension that is in Northern Ireland. And not saying that the Catholic population increasing is a bad thing, because it's not by any means, but if you continue that increase in population, students go to those schools, and then that stress and level of bias towards others who differ from them can still be there, which has made the need for integrated education. Now, the idea for integrated education began in the 1970s in a campaign called All Children Together. And it was begun by a group of parents who wanted to share their children's education with other families of differing religions. So I thought this was really interesting because, it's kind of stating these parents want their students to receive an efficient education with differences. Now, the National Council for Integrated Education, these are the main people behind integrated education schools. They coordinate efforts to develop integrated education and support parent groups through the process of opening new schools. And as one of our articles stated, integrated educated people in Northern Ireland are significantly more likely to hold optimistic views of future relations between two commonalities than less qualified counterparts. So the integrated educated schools are really valuable, and they're creating a really strong structure in Northern Ireland, and I think helping defeat that bias, which I think the United States should look at, especially in terms of, those limited worldviews, just because people don't have the experience with those who differ in mindsets from them and through experiences. As of 2018, around 7% of school-aged children in Northern Ireland are educated in schools which are officially integrated. And the Student Enrollment Bulletin for the 2017-2018 school year stated that more than 23,000 pupils participate in integrated education, an increase of more than 500 since last year. So again, this integrated education system is really starting to make a push. People are starting to value it and see the positive benefits that come out from it, which I think is just immensely rewarding and really great on Northern Ireland's part to kind of push this education and show that, we care about this. We don't want it to continue our children to continue to hold these biases. We want to create a welcoming, inclusive, and integrated society. And that is all I have on the primary and secondary education system in Northern Ireland, along with a hint of the Catholic and integrated education school systems. I hope you all have a safe flight to Ireland, and I will be seeing you shortly.